Hey sellers, welcome to another initial Recce. This one's going to be ASL scenario 260, Last Hope at New Flower. It came out originally in the Soldiers of the Negus pack, and it deals with Italians and Ethiopians, and there's some Eritreans thrown in the mix for good measure to back up the Italians. Seems to be an interesting scenario. We've already had one playthrough, Dave and I. Went really, again, really interesting dealing with two low quality sets of troops. Ethiopians are actually a little bit better than the Italians, mainly because they have a 7 morale, which we're going to get into. But yeah, it's an interesting scenario. So this scenario deals with a last-ditch effort by the Ethiopians to retake back their country through capturing the capital, or I should say retaking it from the Italians who had captured it back in April. Now, the Ethiopian Emperor Selassie had actually departed the country into exile back in May, and the war was effectively over. The Italians claimed victory. However, there was a very strong resistance movement still in place, especially in the many hills surrounding Addis Ababa. If you remember my mission briefing on the region, you know where it is. It basically lies in the foothills with many plateaus, so it's very hilly, rugged country all around the capital, which the Italians did not have good control of. Yes, they controlled the main arteries and the main capital, but they did not control the countryside. And so there was a determined resistance. And one of these Ras, as they were called, which is basically like an army commander, raised enough forces in the surrounding region to commence an attack with the view to capturing the capital. However, as you'll find out reading the scenario card, the attack petered out. Is just no match against tribesmen against the machine guns against the quick responding Italians, which relatively for the Italians was quite quick indeed. In this particular case, it had roughly 50,000 or so Ethiopians attacking a garrison of roughly 10,000 or so Italians with some Eritrean allies. And in the course of 2 days, they made some serious headway. However, as I said, the Italians managed to stop them and push them out of the city. And that was basically the last major resistance battle that was fought, although again resistance did continue all the way through to 1941 when the British finally liberated the country and the emperor came back from exile. On Scenario Archive, this scenario is a balance 50-50, so they have 14 recorded plays including the roar plays, and there's 7 wins for each side, so it seems to be fairly well balanced. Now, I don't know if anybody's used any of the balance measures available in the scenario, or if it's just play the forces as is. But again, that speaks pretty good for it being a 7 out of 7. Italians are the scenario defender in this, and approaching mainly from off-board, while the Ethiopians enter from off-board as well. So this is almost like a meeting engagement, although the Italians do have 2 first-line half-squads set up on the map board. But they don't pose much of a threat to the Ethiopians, and slowly the Italians start to reinforce, send their troops basically between turns 2, 3, and 4, while the Ethiopians enter on turn 1 and push towards the marketplace. The scenario covers 3 half boards, so half of board 23, half of 20, and half of 10. And let's get into it. So the Ethiopians win immediately if they control hex 10Y5, which is this hex located right here, and 3 hexes of this building here, ground level locations only. So that means they have to run a unit through each of those ground level locations because no quarter is in effect, so they cannot do any mopping up. So you physically have to occupy all 3 of the 4 ground level locations. Again, the Italians move second, so in the game lasts 8 turns, and there's a chance, if you're not aware of it, where the Italians could end up sneaking in and claiming back one of those 4 locations that you have to collect. Just something to bear in mind as an Ethiopian player. All right, let's look at SSRs. So the first one we're going to deal with lists the weather conditions and map changes that happen. This is usually the first one in any scenario, and this one follows that same routine. Rain is always in effect. Weather is overcast, EC are wet, and there's no wind at start. So with a wet EC, there's -2 to any kindling attempts. Should you, as a player, Italian, probably try and kindle any of the wood or woods buildings, you'll be at a -2, so it's probably not recommended to waste your time trying to kindle things, especially because you're going to be hard pressed. The Ethiopian's going to be right on your face, so it's going to be not a lot of time for you to waste trying to kindle stuff. But at any rate, easy or wet, and of course there's no wind at start. As I mentioned, it's overcast and rain is falling throughout the scenario, and it never ceases. So a wind directional change of 3 will never end the rain, but it will lessen the intensity if heavy rain occurs. Now, normally when you do the wind change die roll and rain's in effect, if you roll a 10, 11, or 12, the rain's increased to heavy, which affects line of sight by making it a +1 hindrance for 1 to 6 range, and then 7+ is a +2 low visibility hindrance. Normally rain is only a +1 at 7 hexes and beyond. Now back to the wind change. If you roll a 2 or a 3, normally that would cease the rain. However, in this case, it only lessens it back to normal range should it be heavy at the time that you make your roll. There's 7 overlays that are on this map, and let's go through them. So the first one we're going to talk about is a 2-hex row house stone. The second one is open ground to replace a building that's in this location that's on the normal map. And the third one on board 20 is a wooden house to be put here. I believe this is originally a stone 1.5 story building, but it's been replaced by a wood building. On board 10 we have 4 overlays. We have a 2-hex 1.5 story wood building. We have open ground over here, and then we have 2 orchard overlays that symbolize the marketplace. Now in this case I'm using overlay X3, which is a cluster of what looks to be tents to represent the marketplace. If you've ever been in the Middle East and seen one of the marketplaces, you know exactly what it looks like, or you can see on video and such. It's a bunch of tents. However, these 7 hexes are treated as out-of-season orchards. So visibility from an upper to a lower level will not be impeded like a normal orchards, which are in season. However, again, these are out of season, so out of season rules apply to them. So it becomes basically a hindrance, not a obstacle to the fire and views. Also in that same first SSR, all building terrain effect, less 2 buildings, 10Z6, which is again the cathedral, one of your objectives, and the other one is this large multi-hex stone building. Every building except for those 2 is 1 less terrain effect modifier. So this building over here would normally be +3, now it's a +2. Wood buildings are now +1. Again, there's 2 exceptions, and that is this large multi-hex stone building on board 20 and the cathedral represented by this multi-hex stone building on board 10. And finally, grain is not in season. This is the board 10 here. There's a grain patch right here that's out of season, and there's another one down here. Again, those are all out of season. SSR2 deals with the 2 Italian half squads that are located on the board. In this particular case, they're going to be located within this red boundary on this road intersection. They have to be placed on the road, so somewhere on this road network. And the minute an Ethiopian unit has line of sight to a hex, they must be placed on the board. 2 more SSRs. One is number 3, and that's part of the setup. You have, as I mentioned, 3 reinforcement phases on turns 2, 3, and 4. When the turn 3 reinforcements enter, they come on from one of 4 locations represented by the red arrows with the number 3 in it. So you have these 3 on this side, and then you have this one on this side. You must pick one of these 4, and you must pick it before the game starts. So you don't know where the Ethiopians are going to set up. You don't know where they're going to be on turn 3, and they could easily reach these buildings on turn 3, so bear that in mind. Or this cluster buildings as well in the same time frame. You must pick one of those 4 hexes, and that's where they come on. So choose wisely. Is due to the unfamiliarity with the terrain. They've only been in occupation of the city for a month and a half-ish. They're not allowed to use bypass on any buildings. Woods, yes. Buildings, no. So only woods are they allowed to bypass normally. And that's the 4 SSRs. Next up, we're going to look at the orders of battle. All right, let's look at the Ethiopians first. Ethiopians have basically 22 squads of varying caliber, 4 elites, and 18 regular, as well as 4 leaders, a dismantled medium, and 2 LMGs. Now, if you notice the unit colors, if you never used Ethiopians before, they actually printed 2 types. You have the Italian trained version and you have the native tribesman version. They are interchangeable. There's no difference between them. All you refer to is the leader morale level and the modifier. You don't care necessarily about the uniforms. So when the card displays that, again, it doesn't matter. There's no difference. As I said, you have a dismantled medium to enter the play. Once you assemble it, it becomes a 4 portage point, 11 range, 4 firepower weapon, which with Ethiopian hands must be used by an elite unit, otherwise you suffer penalties. So we'll get into the specifics for the Ethiopians in a second here. Also something to remember, your unit is very low morale. You have ELRs of 2s. Yes, your base morale is 7 for all your units, but your ELR is only 2, which means there's going to be a lot of ELRing and or possible disruption. You may end up with a lot of conscripts by the end of the scenario. And your sniper activation number is a 3. Returning to the medium before we move on to the special rules, remember that your medium has a 4 to kill number for armored vehicles. And if you look at the Italian armored car, it's 0 armor factor. So a 4 or less at 7 or more hexes will be able to kill it, or I should say mobilize it, possibly kill it depending how low you roll. And it gets better the closer range there. So if you're firing at an adjacent unit, it's going to be 6 or less. If you're firing at a 2 to 6 hex range armored car, it's going to be a 5 or less pin, which is not too bad, especially if you have multiple rate of fire. All right, so let's look at the special rules for the Ethiopians. So if you've never dealt again with Ethiopians, there's a lot of rules you got to know. They're basically treated as allied miners. So the first thing you have to remember is that patsies, any non-elite allied miner troops take a 1 patsy as opposed to the normal one when called upon to take one. That's the only thing that applies with allied miners. And then the Ethiopians have a whole special set of rules. They have their own class structure, which is slightly different. There's 2 types of first lines, a 337 and a 237. Again, one's square circle, one's a square, one's a circle. You also have elite 347s, and then of course you have the conscripts. Now your battle force will consist of a mix of all the first line and elite units. So you have 347s, you have 337s, and you have 237s, all of varying capabilities. Again, these are almost interchangeable. These represent more or less your Italian trained units. These ones are more your tribal units. Other rules you got to remember, only elite units can form multi-location fire groups. So when you detach one of these guys to man the medium so you don't pay the penalty, then you're only going to be left with 3 that maybe carry your attack. So you're not going to be having very many multi-location fire groups. You must remember that. All these guys here, majority of your troops, will not be able to do multi-location fire groups. Ethiopians can human wave, just like a Russian. So this is a very handy tactic in the right circumstances. If you want to take advantage of the increased morale, the fact you can't be pinned, your effectively 8 morale troops moving in open have a good chance of making it, at least most of them should, to your objective. Again, the Italians come on piecemeal, and if you use this judiciously at the right time, you might be able to catch them with their pants down, basically not enough numbers to stop, and your outnumbering force will be able to deal with them relatively easier. You can also use hand-to-hand as the Japanese. Now, if you look at G1.64, Japanese hand-to-hand, which basically says whenever you are the attacker, which in this particular case means if it's your turn to move, you're the attacker, all caps, then you must use hand-to-hand. If you gain ambush, you must use hand-to-hand. Even if you're a defender and you gain ambush, you will then use hand-to-hand in your attack. So the only time you're going to be fighting a normal melee is if the Eritrean Italians move into your location and engage you in melee. and then you'll be stuck doing that. Ethiopians have a tank flip capability, which you must try at least once, if nothing else, just for the lark. Maybe if you play a scenario a second time is when you can get away with doing this, but it's an interesting mechanic, and it actually happened historically as the Italians in early 30s or mid 30s only had light tankettes, effectively, basically 1 and 2 man little armored vehicles, and they were quite easy to flip over with determined effort, and the Ethiopians were rather determined in that ability, and this is represented in the rule. Now, the attack happens during the close combat phase in lieu of a normal close combat attack, so you have a choice. You can try a normal 5 CCV, try and kill the tank, or you can try a tank flip. Now, the difference with the tank flip and a normal CCV is you require a minimum of 2 squads. The more squads you add, obviously, the better your chance. You get a modifier to it. These are the modifiers right here. If you manage to roll a final 7, you've immobilized the vehicle. A 6 or less, it's a scrounged wreck that you've created. So there's a couple modifiers to it. Typically, the only one you're going to get is street fighting ambush and your leadership modifier if you've had leadership, and or if you manage to have 3 squads in a location. Again, this is an interesting tactic that you must try just for the sheer sake of saying you flip the tank. But tactically, make sure you fit it into your plan, and if you don't get the chance, then don't begrudge yourself. But it's a cool mechanic, I think. Next up, we have the limitations on mediums, heavies, and mortars. An Ethiopian can only fire these things without modifiers if he's an elite unit. So non-elite Ethiopians have the breakdown and multiple rate of fire lowered by 1 for any weapon. So your medium, if you give it to your 237, is only going to have a 1 rate of fire, and the breakdown is going to be 11. Now, something else about your guns I failed to mention. Your LMGs have a breakdown of 11, like most allied minor weapons. Your MMG has a normal breakdown of 12. So again, if you give your medium to one of your first line units, you're going to be having a lower breakdown number and a lowered rate of fire. Just something to bear in mind. Not really applicable in this scenario. However, should you be lucky enough to capture a vehicle in combat, maybe the tank crew or the armored car crew in this scenario dismounts with the rear mounting medium machine gun, which they can do, then you can jump into the tank, and there's capture use penalties as well, which are basically doubled. And lastly, no quarter is always in effect because it is after November 35. Before November 35, it would be Ethiopians only, but after that, it's no quarter for both sides. So just remember that. Therefore, the Ethiopians cannot secure a building by mopping up. And of course, prisoners will not be an issue, and all units will attempt to low crawl away from combat. And I guess the last point, should it ever happen, when it comes to leader creation, because you're Ethiopian, you get a +1 die roll, so you're going to have lower quality leaders on average appearing, and or none from your units, just to represent your ill-trained nature. All right, let's look at the defender. So we're going to break this up into 4 sections for ease. So the first ones we have are your 2 half squads. These ones set up on the board, as I said, in this road network, and they must set up hip. Now, where would you put them? I-6 is a prime spot just because it lets you look right down this road. If you combine the 2 squads together, you can reach out to 6 with a firepower of 1. Yes, ring will be an issue, but depending. You can reach out and tag them up to 6 with a firepower of 1. You won't leave any residual. Or you can wait till the 3 hexes away, drop a 1 residual, and attack them with 2 firepower. However, depending, again, you don't know where they're going to come on from. The Ethiopians could come on from this direction primarily, maybe a small force from this direction. You might waste your units here. And again, the minute that a unit pops on board and is in sight of you, you become visible. Another prime location might be I-10. This is more of a reserve and gives you more tactical flexibility because by the first turn, if you count it up, a guy on a road is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for road bonus with the leader. This is as far as you can be, and then he'll advance to E8. and then you'll show up right here. Or if he comes this way, he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the hedge, 7, 8, and then he advances onto the bridge. Again, if you're in this location over here somewhere, then he will be able to see you, and you'll have to come on the board. However, being in this location might be a better objective than this location. Yes, you're missing out on the initial shot. However, here you have more flexibility because depending on where he comes, you have to be very cognizant of where your next move is going to be. These are only 1 firepower, 3 ranged troops with a morale of 6. They are not going to live very long, and you must factor that into the battle. So use them smartly, and or try and use them to either break concealment or deny some terrain, or at least make it more difficult for them to fight for. But they're going to be rolled over quite quickly. Then we'll have reinforcements that enter on turn 2. These units come on from 20Q10, which is this road section right here. Again, they'll probably be mounted up on the trucks, although you could dismount them if you so choose. However, the trucks will give you a good 20 range move and get you into the battle a lot faster. They only have 21 portage points, which means you can only fit 2 squads and a leader or an LMG in them. And you'll have 2 armored cars as well. These are your biggest guns with an 8 coax firepower, and you also have a rear-mounted, effectively an MMG firepower of 4, firing out of the rear stationary. How do we use these guys? Again, they come on from here. Now you have to bear in mind the Ethiopians, as I said, are going to move quite quickly. They're probably going to ignore your 2 half squads, and even if they're in this location down here, at some point on the Ethiopian turn 2, they're probably going to be at least in this location here. And if this is where they park their medium, it's going to give them a nice view right down the scenario all the way down, or the map all the way down to the cathedral location. It only has 11 hex range, so there is that, which brings it down to Y10, but you can still get a 2 firepower attack into this area here. You throw in a leader, and it makes it that much more interesting. Again, rain will mitigate that somewhat, but by turn 2, you're going to have a medium sitting here, which means it has a chance of penning your armored car, let alone your trucks. And if you move too far into the road, you're going to get shot up. Now, we did one playthrough, and I made it up as far as X7. I basically was bottlenecked in this area here. I couldn't go into this position because, again, Dave had his medium set up here. Now, your armored cars are probably going to be best served. We're going to cover this more in key terrain, but for you, parking an armored car here in T9 with its covered arc in this way will be good because it gives you a good vantage point to this potential Ethiopian cutoff point, and of course it gives you a nice vantage point down the road. You can then lay a nice fire lane and hopefully interdict anybody that tries to pass across the road, and you're relatively nice and safe covered by the bridges. Alternatively, you could send another car down here. Again, you got to be leery of where that medium is. You want to try and stay long range, and it'll help you deal with anything that makes it into these buildings later on in the game. You do have the option, if you read the footnotes that come with your vehicle, of dismounting your rear gun. It becomes a dismantled medium in your hands. So for whatever reason the crew wants to abandon the vehicle, or if you it has to be a crew in the vehicle that abandons the vehicle and takes the rear mounted gun with them. They can pass it off to a normal unit, maybe jump back in the vehicle. Again, that takes a lot of time, and with the rate of Ethiopian advance are going to be on you, you really don't have that kind of time. But should the opportunity allow, you may want to dismantle the rear mounted machine guns, and that gives you potentially two Italian mediums, which you can then use in your ground forces to fight off. But again, the armored car CMG has an 8 firepower value. It's much more important to use that than worry about the 2 mediums. But again, you never know. You might have a flexible enough time where you can do that kind of thing to recover it. Then we have more reinforcements in the form of Italian 346s, a 9-1, and a leader. Now these ones are the interesting ones. They can come on in one of those 4 locations already mentioned. So you have these 3 over here, and then you have this one over here. Again, you must pre-designate this before the scenario commences. You do not know where the Italians are going to be. If you count it out, again, we said they're going to be on the bridge by the end of turn 1, CXing with a leader. Then they're going to go 6, 1, 2, 3, bypass 4, 5, 6, advance onto F4 in turn 2. In turn 3, they can easily be into these buildings, as you can see, with a leader, advanced units. And if you come on this way, you're in the open, you're going to get massacred. Another key setup for the Ethiopians is probably going to be in this location, and again, they're going to reach at around the same time, around turn 3. So that's one reason to have your armored car here. Maybe you can deal some damage. But if they get units in this location, you're going to be shot to pieces as you try and enter the board. However, you must come on somewhere. Advantage this number, this entry point, 20 GG5, is probably the best choice. However, again, it's the most risk, because if you look at the map, the obvious route for the Ethiopians to take is probably going to be a main attack through the center, or it's going to be along the north. And if you're going to run into most of the forces, again, you'll be cut to pieces. However, should this only be a trickle force, maybe your half squads come from here, jump into this building, act as a cutoff. Maybe they withstand any kind of close combat and slow down this advance somehow. It could be a miracle, you never know. Your units will have a good attack coming up through here. Alternatively, you may want to come in through this one here, Q6, and you have two choices. Either you can try and fight any kind of Ethiopian rear guard, or you can just run into these forward positions before the Ethiopians get to them as well. Again, you have to pick your entry point before the game starts. And then lastly, we have the Eritreans. They come on in turn 4. You have 5 347s, which ironically are higher value troops than your 346s, with an 8-1 and an LMG. They come on through Q10 on board 10. And they're probably going to be your cutoff force, marketplace security force. So again, with the leader CXing, you can easily reach this location, and you're in Y7 at the end of turn 4 when you show up. And you can send your other force maybe north to help secure this building here, so that when the Ethiopians finally cut through your Italians, they'll have some opposition to face them. Again, you must have some units in this location to contest the victory condition hexes by the end of the game. All right, next up, we're going to look at some terrain analysis using the Akoka factors. Again, observation, fields of fire, cover and concealment, obstacles, key terrain, and avenues of approach. Those 5 little facets of military intelligence are used to analyze the battle space. I figured why not use them here. Now this is primarily from the attacker perspective, although defender it reciprocates, so you could bear that in mind as well. Your largest detriment is probably going to be the rain. In our one playthrough that we had heavy rain for most of the scenario, which again adds a +1 up to 6 hexes and a +2 7 hexes and beyond. And when you tackle in the terrain effect modifier for the buildings or the woods, you're quickly looking at +2s to +3s, and maybe modified with some non-assault movement on the enemy's part, and or a leader or two to bring it down. But you're still looking at a positive modifier on average. Even moving in open, you're going to be down to a -1 as opposed to a normal -2, depending again on the rain that's falling. So it's going to be definitely your biggest detriment to fire. Your Ethiopian Elite 347 should be manning your medium. And again, I9 is a primo hex, just because it gives you excellent view right down the center. Italian forces primarily come on from the south, and you're going to be in position by turn 2. When they start rolling in on their turn 2, you're going to be able to easily cut them to pieces should they try and cross in normal range, which goes all the way out to Y10. Down in Y1 and beyond, it's going to be only 2 firepower. However, it's still a chance of destroying them before they have a chance. So you're going to have a good way to minimize Italians on the north half of the map. You're primarily going to confine them to the south half of the map. So you can basically break down your assault into two main thrusts with one side jot, which we're going to get to. The primary assault, the way I would probably do it, is come along the north with most of your elite forces, barring the one medium crew, and the majority of your squads, just because it serves two purposes. It lets you come all the way here while most of the Italian defense on this side, you're fairly well covered. Secondly, if this is the location chosen for the turn 3 Italian reinforcements, you're in position to deal with that. And once that's dealt with, again, it's a fairly covered approach all the way down to the marketplace. Again, your mediums up there covering the road, but they have to make the long way around and risk being shot to pieces as they enter the way. Alternatively, you could send your main force down the center with a detachment that heads towards the north, again, for those purposes already discussed. The good thing about dealing with the center is, and if you use a human wave properly and the right time, you might be able to break the Italian defense, and then it's almost a clear run, barring any Eritreans that wait around the marketplace. The little side jot that I was talking about is probably consisting of maybe two squads and an LMG. You don't want to detach too many forces, but a cutoff position over here in T3 is a good spot because you can cover all three entry points for the turn 3 reinforcements should he come on this way. And if he doesn't, you can then contribute to the attack and help your center force deal with this row house block and then push further to the east. Your fire is going to be restricted again because of the fairly dense terrain. Yes, there's plenty of open ground, but there's also a lot of cover between buildings and woods. And again, the rain, that'll be impacting a lot of your shots. So given the fact that most of your troops have a 3 firepower, you're going to be down the 2 table. You may want to have 2 squads per hex, so at least you get up on the 6. Maybe a 4, depending on the quality type. Tack on LMG, you might even be able to get a 6 or even an 8 firepower attack. But most of your shots are not going to be that strong. They're going to be generally probably on the 4 firepower range. And they're going to be fairly short range, again, because of the density of the terrain with all the buildings and woods. For the Italians, again, use of fire lanes is probably going to be key. If you can have an armored car sitting in T9, this is an excellent fire lane. Also, you have a chance of suppressing this building should the Ethiopians move into that location. Alternatively, you want to pick a spot that lets you do, again, a nice fire lane. And you're going to be restricted, again, because if this is where that medium sets up, he's going to totally cut the map in half. So you may want to pick X8 as another good spot to fight from, bearing in mind that this building here is a normal terrain effect, so it's going to be +3 stone. Everything else is only going to be +2 or +1, again, because of that SSR rule. However, that allows you to do a nice little open lane. Definitely helps you cover this open area, and it helps you bring fire onto this row house, which will probably be a likely staging area, maybe preceding an Ethiopian human wave, you never know. We've already talked about the 2 Italian half squads where you set them up. Again, in our playthrough, I set them up one in this location, one in this location. This is a completely ineffective location. Do not put them here. Why? Because it only has 3x range with 1 firepower, and if he stays in PA, he can stick his tongue out at me, and there's nothing I can do about it because there's only a half firepower. I could detach 2 squads there, or 2 half squads there, and give it a 1 firepower attack, but again, that leaves the rest of the map open, so I would advise against this location. There's 2 spots that leaves then. Basically, again, I6, you can cut him up when he comes down this road. Yes, it's only going to be a 2 firepower attack at 3 hexes. However, that's a 1 residual sitting maybe on this roadside intersection, and even a 1 residual down 2 is going to be enough because residual doesn't have memory. It's not going to remember the rain modifiers if it's in play. All it's going to do, remember, is the -2, and on the 1 table, it's still fairly effective. And yes, while they have 7 morale, there's still a chance that that could be enough. So this is a key spot, I think. Alternatively, you could set him back here to I10. Why you would do that? It gives you more options, more flexibility to adjust to the Ethiopian plan, because if he doesn't come down the center, then these guys are wasted. If he sends most of his force down this way, these guys are wasted again. You have to bring them in close. They're going to get shot up. They're not going to be effective. And they're basically not even a speed bump at this point. They're just they're going to blink and they're going to miss them. So if you set up an I-10, it gives you more flexibility. You can see where they come on, and then you can move to adjust. They might move into E8 with road bonus movement being CX'd, and then they become visible, so you can attempt to fire, and or you can move into a location like E1, for example, act as some kind of cutoff for anything that comes this way. However, regardless of which way you move, you're going to be a weak powered troop with a maximum 2 firepower, maximum normal range of 3, and a low morale of 6. So you're not long for this world, so you got to use your force wisely. Alright, cover and concealment. All buildings, as we said in the SSR, are lowered by 1 with the exception of those 2 stone buildings. Again, you have this large multi-hex one here, ZAA4, and you have Z6. Those are the only 2 ones that are normal terrain effect. Everything else is down by 1. So the stone buildings are +2s, the woods are +1. And again, a wood building will negate your non-assault movement, giving you a flat rate. If there's no rain, you're looking at anywhere from a 2 to a 4, maybe a 6 firepower attack coming at you flat. So you must bear that in mind when you're moving. As we said, the map is fairly dense, but there's plenty of open spaces that could be covered with fire from both sides, so you must be aware of those. Once you get into the buildings, you must be aware of their dash capability and definitely use it. Any kind of modifier you can get against enemy fire is good, and having firepower is the best way to do it, especially when you're looking at a 2 firepower attack down to the 1 table. Ethiopians only have a 2 ELR, and while they have a base morale of 7, they're still going to be breaking a lot. So there's, again, plenty of cover behind to have when you're 8-0 leader, maybe the A1, get a negative modifier in the back somewhere, acting as a route destination eventually, so that he can bring back the Ethiopians as quickly as possible and send them back into the battle. If they're left to themselves on a self-rally, remember the broken morale is going to be 1 less. Their 347 should be a 6. Yeah, 6 morale for all your units. It becomes very hard to self-rally, and they're going to be left too far back in the battle to make a difference, which means you're going to have to try and self-rally your DM'd ones at the front. So having a leader somewhere in the back that's able to quickly rally them and bring them back is probably going to be advisable. For the Italians, again, you're probably going to be looking at a medium sitting in I9. At least that's what I would do. That's what Dave did. And it's going to be cutting off the complete center of the map, which is going to restrict most of your movement to the south, unless you want to come all the way around here when he's firing long range to move on to the north side. However, by that point, his main assault force is probably going to be coming in as well. You're not going to have much in the way of fallback points because an aggressive Ethiopian player is going to be constantly in your face, and he's going to constantly be under DM, constantly falling back. So unless you rally quickly, your chances are you're not going to come back at all. Now, no quarters in effect, so remember you always have that low crawl option even if it's into open ground. Remember, you still cannot remain adjacent to an enemy unit. However, you might be able to get away using low crawl, so you're basically broken quite easily with your 6 morale. You're going to be slowly trekking your way towards the marketplace, possibly into this building here. Now, you cannot afford to send your leaders down too soon to act as route destinations, but you may want to send them back with a broken unit when applicable. So, all that being said, for the Ethiopians, initially the first 2 turns you're almost unimpeded. You have 2 half squads to worry about, but they become a blip. You send in 1 squad, this guy will probably fire. If he doesn't, the squads keep moving until at some point he fires, and at that point he's pretty well done because he'll have to have his firepower. Now it's suddenly a 1. Yes, it's still a -2. However, you can't afford to stay and fight these half squads too long. You must keep moving because you only have 8 turns across 3 map boards and fight this contested area that's going to be full of Eritreans. So you must treat those 2 half squads as little blips. You can detach maybe a couple squads to deal with them, but maybe you're lucky enough to get a sniper attack on them and that does your damage for you. But your majority of your force should be bypassing those units, maybe at the sacrifice of 1 or 2 squads to deal with them. You want to reach the marketplace ideally probably by turn 6, 7 at the latest, because you have to fight for these buildings. Again, barring a complete collapse of the Italian Eritreans, you're going to have some units in this location which you're going to have to fight your way through. So you must be on board 10 by turn 6 at the latest. You're pushing it if you wait till turn 7. I don't think you're going to have enough time to again, barring complete collapse, to work your way into the victory condition hexes. Now, if the rain increases to heavy, with that extra modifier for low visibility, it might improve your chances. It definitely lowers the attack from a -2 moving it open to a -1, and that's much more bearable than the -2, even on the 1 or 2 table. All right, let's look at obstacles. Obstacles are only really going to appear for the Ethiopians in the mid to late game. Again, you have 2 half squads, which could be a human obstacle, but they should be dealt with quite easily. They're generally ineffective. Even if you gauge them in melee, they're 1 firepower, maybe 2 if they're stacked together. And with one of your squads, you're at least a 1-to-1 odds, and you're definitely going to outnumber them in close combat. And you have 22 squads to deal with, or 22 squads to play with, where they only have 2 measly half squads in your way for the first 2 turns. So that is some time to deal with that minor obstacle. But your biggest obstacles moving forward is definitely going to be this open area here. It's going to be covered by fire. You're probably going to have fire lanes down the road, which are going to prevent easy crossing of the roads. Again, remember your dash ability. And by turn 4, the Italians should be somewhere in this vicinity here. It should be somewhere along this road barrier. Maybe not on this side, again, depending how this whole reinforcement thing works off. Generally speaking, most of your forces are going to be clustered in this area from the turn 2, and then the turn 3 guys will be coming in possibly from the rear. So again, most of your Ethiopians will probably be on this side, with the Italians on this side here. So you will have some obstacles to cover. If they can get troops in those locations to cover all those routes, it'll make your life that much more difficult. Again, you do have dash, and because you outnumber them, if you have enough units in these locations here, you can always human wave, move your 8 hexes, or your 8 movement points with your higher morale. You don't get pinned, and that might be a way to overcome any stubborn Italian defense in these locations. Again, for the Italians, you're not going to have much in the way of defense, and they do come on piecemeal. You could have up to 9 squads somewhere in this area, maybe in this row house, more than likely south, and with hopefully some fire lanes to cover off the roads. So your obstacles for you are definitely going to be crossing over into the north half. Again, if that MG is sitting up here looking down this way, it just completely cuts the map in half, and then you have to take the long way around, and by that time the Ethiopians are coming closer. But again, depending on where the force is, if the main force is on this side, obviously you have to adjust and you have to get over there. If you can get some kind of defense as an Italian player to cover this road intersection, it'll probably make your life a lot easier. You're probably going to be facing an Ethiopian with an LMG, maybe sitting in this hex here, maybe this hex here. That's going to make your life difficult. But if you can control the roads, it'll definitely impede the present bigger obstacles to the Ethiopians. And the last point about obstacles. For the Italians and Eritreans, again, due to the unfamiliarity because of the SSR, you cannot bypass buildings. You can only bypass woods. So buildings, no. Woods, yes. So that's going to limit your ability. Ethiopians, on the other hand, can easily bypass. So your 2 turns of almost unimpeded progress forward, and then from there on in, you're working. You should be able to get at least to this building here by turn 4. And then you can contest these buildings for a couple of turns before you get all the way across. So let's look at key terrain. Now, for this scenario, for the Ethiopians, I think there's 2 key pieces of terrain that have to be covered. One is there must be some kind of fire base in this location. Not a very big one. Again, 2 squads and an LMG. Why? Because you can cover all 3 entrance points. You can, if he parks his armored car here and you have an LMG, again, a 4 AP shot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're looking at a 5 or less to kill with a rate of fire of 1 on the LMG. So it's, there is a chance you'll be able to take out his armored car. Yes, you're going to be taking fire back. However, a chance as good as any. And because you can also cover the approaches from the turn 3 reinforcements, you should probably have something in this location here. You could set up back here if you want, but it's wood, a +1. Why do that when you have a +2? This +2 gives you a better vantage point. Alternatively, you can set up in U5. Again, for the same reasons, you have a good wide coverage of field of view, and you can stop anything that comes this way while the rest of your force moves down here. The second key terrain is something has to be in this area by turn 3. Again, you don't know which one of these 4 entrances they're going to use, and you have to have some kind of fire on this hex here. Ideally, something with an LMG with a rate of fire that you can leave a good residual, because he has to come through this hex in order to enter onto the map board. So if he moves as a stack, again, obviously it's not the wisest move, or you move in piecemeal. He only got 5 squads and 1 hex, and if you can pin him down this hex, you may end up keeping some of them off board, or else he's going to have to overstack, and that'll be even worse for him. For the Italians, again, this is a good spot for an armored car with its 8 firepower attack. You have easy eyes on that one. You have a nice fire lane down this road. And your second armored car, maybe X1, just again to help suppress this building and cover anything that comes down this way here. It might also, it's risky, but you can also try and park in Y1, but you're going to be taking some long-range shots from a medium, which again, 4 to kill, is still a chance of panning your 0 armor. So I probably advise against moving to Y1. But yeah, key terrain for the armored car is definitely T9, possibly X1. You could also alternatively send it all the way down through here and come up this way to provide some kind of cover, maybe CC2. By probably turn 4, you'd be in this location, depending how many turns it takes you to move, as to give some kind of fire this way. But you must have an armored car in T9 at least, possibly X1 and or CC2, just to cover your avenues. And of course, the biggest key terrain for you as an Italian player is going to be the marketplace and the cathedral. You must have your Eritreans in this vicinity. Yes, you can send them forward to help fight off the Ethiopians, but there should be something here to prevent any side pushes from the north and or down the center that are going to be taking your victory conditions away. Even having 1 squad and a leader here concealed is enough to possibly deter, unless you're seriously outnumbered. And yeah, as long as you don't die in close combat. All right, let's talk avenues approach. Again, this is primarily going to apply to the attacker, but we'll have to cover the defender because you're coming from off board. So as I said, for the reasons I already mentioned, I see 2 main attacks coming from the Ethiopians. One is a force this way just because of the bridges, and the other force is this way. Which is the largest depends entirely up to you. You're going to have set up over here, you're going to send in 1 squad into I1. You'll find out if there's a unit here. If not, then all these forces can run as quickly as possible to this location. Again, you're going to CX 1 squad and you're going to get them far forward as possible. Obviously, you want to avoid moving as a stack, but once you've proven that there's no unit here, you have to worry about other units along the way. Again, these are likely spots. However, they could slow down it, but you're always going to have at least 1 unit in the lead that's going to be giving away the ghost as soon as you see this person. So how you find that out is going to be entirely up to you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You could advance a guy into G6, just a unit by himself, or just to reveal if there's any units along this location here. But again, there's 2 main axes that I see for the attacker. One is to come through the bridge in the center. The other one is the bridge in the north. From there, again, depending on how you set up, determines what your best course is. You must bear in mind that the Italians are going to be coming on turn 3 from either here or from here, and therefore sending a strong force to the north is probably the best bet for two reasons. One is most Italians will be cut off if you have that MMG sitting here, and therefore this side will be largely uncontested. And if you're in this area by turn 3, you'll be able to deal with anything that comes on this way. Yes, you might be pinned down. You might roll boxcars like Dave did, but luckily for you, hopefully it doesn't happen all the time, and you might be able to cause some serious damage to anybody that comes on this way if you have a large enough force. Once that's dealt with, you can then continue your advance. Again, fairly well covered because you have your cutoff here, you've got your MMG here, and they're able to do significant damage while you have maybe a meager center force working its way here. The other way of doing that is to send a main attack force through the center south, I suppose, with a small cutoff to the north for the same reasons. The good thing about coming through the center is there's plenty of cover. You have this whole complex of buildings, woods, and orchards here, and you can easily make it to the row house by turn 4. From there, a couple of dashes, maybe a human wave, and you're across the road into these buildings here, and you're pushing the Italians to the east. If you look at the Italians, actually before we do that, let's finish off the Ethiopians. So as I said already, you should have eyes on the marketplace no later than turn 6. Ideally, turn 5 is obviously better. However, you may be pushed, depending on how stubborn the defense is, to 6, maybe a turn 7. But again, at that point, you're pushing it, depending completely on what's available here. If there's a large Eritrean presence on turn 7 in this location, it's highly unlikely that you're going to make it. Alternatively, if it's a complete collapse, then it could just be a cakewalk and walking in. If too many forces are committed forward by the Italians, then and they're dealt with, then again you'll have a relatively unimpeded access to take on the buildings. Now, to take the buildings, again, for building control purposes, it has to be 3 out of these 4 ground level locations. So you must first walk a unit into this marketplace central location, and then you must walk a unit through the ground floor of at least these probably top 3 building locations. Bear in mind that the Italians move last, so if he keeps 1 unit here, all he has to do is advance into here and you're SOL, assuming you don't deal with it. And then finally for the Italians. So again, for them, the hardest part's going to be your turn 3 reinforcements. Which hex do you enter on? I like GG5, however, it's the most dangerous. It gets you right into the mix of the battle right away. You could have a good chance of pinning down a lot of units. However, you're probably going to get mauled as you enter this building location. Even if you advance in, assault move in with your squads, you're going to be at a -1, barring any heavy rain, which hopefully kicks on so that you'll at least have that protection to minimize your shots. Luckily, facing you will not be that much firepower, maybe 6 firepower, maybe an unlucky 8 firepower attack coming on you. And if he has a -1 leader, it's really going to hurt your day. But it's a very dangerous move to come on this way, but will probably be the most effective. Your best bet, however, all in balance, is probably going to be this one here, Q6, just because you can either ignore his cutoff, take your chances, and just work directly into the row house, or you can quickly deal with this because you'll have the numbers, and then once that's suppressed, then you can move on into the rear of the Ethiopians and deal them damage that way. But that's going to be the hardest one, is which hex do you pick from the 4 for your Ethiopians, for your Italians. Your force 2 that comes on during turn 2 through Q10. Again, I've been saying this repeatedly, but if that medium's set up in that location, it will take out your armored cars if he has enough shots, unless you're feeling really lucky. Or rain is an effect which increases the chances of him missing. You can probably make it as far as X7 with your units, and then you have to dismount, let your troops jump into the buildings. Probably on the eastern side of the road is best because the Ethiopians are already going to be on your face right here, and you don't want to fall back into the road because of interdiction purposes. So you're probably going to set up in the east. However, most of your unit is not going to make it this beyond X7 row hex row X. You could detach one of your armored cars, as we said, to come around the south and park itself in CC2. It gives you some kind of cover in this location should this force make it all the way through. But again, turn 3 or 4, there's going to be Ethiopians in this location, and there's not going to be enough probably defense for you to do that. However, any defense is better than none, so just bear that in mind. And that is that. Now, one thing I should mention, which I completely failed to mention about the Italians, and it's quite critical because there will be close combat, is Italian units, non-elite Italian units are lax. Eritreans are not lax. So bear that in mind. Your defending force in the marketplace, Eritreans primarily will not be lax. However, the majority of your units are going to be Italians, and they are. So remember that you get a +1 in your ambush attempt when you go into close combat. I forgot to mention that with the Italians. Mea culpa. And that's it for this initial recce. The one went fairly long. Hopefully I covered a lot. Tactics for the Italians are, I don't say they're set in stone, but they're quite limited because you know where the Italians are going to be coming on down the center, probably in the north. You know that there's probably going to be some kind of cutoff in the south here to deal with your units coming on. And again, if that medium sets up here with a -1 leader, it quite easily cuts off this whole place from units moving this way. You have to risk dashing, and yet you're going to have the firepower. But again, it's a risk that, and you have low morale 6 troops. You don't be breaking in the street because then your day has just gone worse. So yeah, as a general rule, your tactics are pretty well, I think, set. This is the biggest one, is turn 3 reinforcements. Which side do they come on? And unfortunately, you have to pre-designate that, so you cannot wait to see where the Ethiopians are and then choose, unless you play with the balance. I should mention the balance for the scenarios, if applicable. The SSR3 is gone for the Italians. If you want to play, if you both want to play the Ethiopians, the Italian player doesn't have to pre-designate. If you both want to play the Italians, the Ethiopian player forces the Italian turn 4 reinforcements to come on turn 5. So with any luck, Ethiopians are in this vicinity by turn 4. Now the Eritreans won't be into this building until turn 5. That makes you that much closer to achieving your objective. So that's the balance, which again I didn't mention until just now. But yeah, it's an interesting scenario. Again, low quality troops, low ELRs, low sniper numbers, armored cars which can die from machine gun fire or be flipped over. Oh, that's something else I failed to mention. Apologies for what seems like a little ramble here, but these armored cars, I made the notes, but I skipped over them. The tank flip, it has to be 4 tons or less. Your trucks are 4.5 tons. Your armored cars are 4 tons. So your armored cars could be flipped over by the Ethiopians. So just bear that in mind as well. But that's what makes this game fun, is something like a tank flip, which you normally don't see. It's one of those little idiosyncrasies that makes scenarios unique, and being able to employ a human wave and then jump on a tank and flip it over in close combat. There's just something cool about that. Dave and I both like the theme of the scenario. As I said, we've already played this one time. We messed up a couple things, like I forgot the Italians were lax, which influenced some ambushes, and that never should have happened. We tried a human wave. He was not able to get a tank flip off. He just rolled too high, but dice weren't very nice to Dave again. But we're going to be giving this another go probably the next couple of days, and we will post that video shortly. But that's enough for me, enough ramble. Let me know what you guys think of this initial recce. Hopefully you've found some use out of it. Hopefully you want to play some Ethiopians versus Italians and some Eritreans. And again, it's kind of like a meeting engagement. 2 forces entering from off board primarily, and contesting a marketplace. So if you can photocopy that overlay X3 if you want to use real boards, then I highly recommend using those instead of out of season orchards. But that's it for me, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.